and problem reaction solution. Well, let me tell you something about Alex Jones and problem reaction solution. He's about 6,000 years too late. And fraternities have been around since the flood. Yeah, get used to that. That's the way it works. You don't like it? Well, some other people don't either, but that's the way it works. You're going to have to learn to live with that. I can only give you the reason problem reaction solution is used so much in the history of the world because it works. If we create a problem, you get a reaction, you get to develop a solution. Well, it is what it is. Regret is useless. You just need to understand it. But Russia, they try to do that in Russia, and Russia immediately implemented a proper ethnic conflict model. What that means is if you're a young Slav walking around Russia, you can say Russia for the Russians, whatever. They're not going to let you say Russian for white people. You're going to have to act like the old communists and say it, not do it, or say whatever you want, just don't do, or do whatever you want, just don't say it. In China, let me give you an example of this that's clear for everyone to see. In China, they say they're communists. They're not communists at all. No, they're not communists at all. They're a pseudo-national socialist, actually. But they're not communists at all. They're just talking. They're self-determined socialism combined with sort of like a feudal state, a corporate feudal state. But they're not communists at all. They just say it. But that's a communist society. People learn to say things and just do something differently. In the United States, many of you racially, even the liberals, say they're diversity and multiculturalism. They live in all-white suburbs. Well, they're in a communist-style mentality. In Russia, you kind of got to understand that. And you could say Russia for the Russians. You can run as a Russian. You could do whatever you want. Just don't say it. That means if you're cutting off someone's head underneath a burning swastika for YouTube, and you're cutting off an immigrant's head saying Hail Hitler, they're going to come arrest you. They're going to give you a couple years in jail. In Anglosphere, in somewhere like Britain, you'd be stuffed and mounted in the local Tolerance Museum, and we'd be watching specials on you on the Discovery Channel over and over again. That's the difference here. So you have to know that someone tried to prop up National Socialism in Russia, and that didn't work. He's not going to give them that energy. He's not going to give that to them. They're doing whatever they want to do. They're not saying it. They're doing it. But the age of isms is over. I'm going to go into the fifth position. You understand the third position, the opposition to communism and capitalism. Well, I'm going to go into our position, the fifth position, which is even beyond that. If you like the third, you're going to love the fifth position. It's the end of wordism, the end of all isms. How about that? It's not idealistic. It's back to white rabbit thinking. But it's back to the basics. When the water's polluted, you go back to the source. You draw some fresh water. Make sense? Sure. But those are ethnic conflict models. Russia, you got a proper ethnic conflict model. It's garbage. I don't like it. He doesn't like it either. But he can run one. If you're in it, you got to know what you're doing and don't make yourself a target. If you're stupid, you're going to end up in trouble. If you're trying to fight the system, you got to go with the energy flow. You got to learn how the game's played, and you got to play it. Now, once you learn that, you can do whatever you want to do. You see, if they're going to flood Russia with a bunch of non-Russians, it creates another energy flow as well. You know, he's not going to square a circle. He's got an 80-90% approval rating, depending on what you're looking at. And I'm going to go into Russia. I'm going to do a whole thing on Russia, on what we see and what we don't see. Obviously, we're not happy until we get our own rabbit hole. And my objective is twofold, by the way. My objective has nothing to do with white nationalism or even idealism. My objective is to make sure you're on a consistent message. Once you're on a consistent message, everything comes after that. Before you swing a samurai sword, you have to first learn to say hi-ya. We understand that? Simple. It's simple sound. It's a vibration that starts, and everything starts with a sound. Everything starts at a low level of vibration. We have to get on a consistent message. And then my objective is to make sure little white rabbits get themselves a home somewhere across the top of the planet. That's a simple objective for me to have. That's something I agreed to. Anglosphere is $100 trillion in debt in America alone. You won't be able to hold on to your gene pool. I don't care how slick of a white nationalist you think you are. By the time you get set up, a German-Russian axis is going to take your males from you lickety-split. Yes, they are. All else being equal. Is all else going to be equal? No. Race is real and it matters. But I'm just putting something in your head. So my objective is moral. My objective is it has nothing to do with idealism, has nothing to do with forming a white country hero. No, it's not. It's just something very simple. I keep things simple. When you keep things simple, you achieve simple objectives. Now, could you take the whole top of the plane? You could do anything you choose to do because you have all the power. By the time you hear this, there's been all this stuff over China. China runs an ethnic conflict model too. They learned it from Anglosphere. They got their males in a consensus trance. You know, you got fear of the Americans or something to be worried about. And I'm going to go into briefly the conflict model in America and what the Chinese are worried about in 1 second here. So there's an ethnic conflict model in Anglosphere. The ethnic conflict model in Anglosphere is an inverted ethnic conflict model. It's an ethnic conflict model the likes of which no one's ever seen. We only have a couple examples of anything close to it, and both times resulted in a lot of violent conflict, all revolving around some of the similar groups in charge in Anglosphere, believe it or not. The American Revolution was against the Crown. The Crown is still an organization, is still a legal entity. It's a corporation. It's a piece of land incorporated. It's a financial Vatican of sorts, but that is still in effect. And in the American Revolution, they got themselves into trouble. They ended up running a conflict model that backfired, and they usually do. Because you see, most of you guys think you're victims, and maybe you're a fireman and you lost a job because of affirmative action or whatever, but you're not a victim. You have power. Victims don't have power. Victims have zero power. That's why they're victims. It's in this type of situation you end up in something extraordinary. You have a common sense of oppression among non-victims. In other words, a common sense of oppression historically occurs among victims. But you're not a victim. You have power. And in any type of ethnic conflict model, the first thing you got to know is energy's got to flow. Makes sense? Energy's got to flow. Right now you're listening to me on some website somewhere. Well, energy's got to flow. Your energy, you got ticked off, you got online, you did some research. That's energy flowing. It's flowing right in front of your face. You're typing online, and you look at Stormfront, you look at the hits, so on and so forth. That energy's flowing. The energy has to flow, but it's never really flown. You know, this stuff's been going on. They created a bottleneck. They created a situation where you're bottling lightning, basically. They created a situation with the hate crime laws. Well, you disengaged. You're not the Latinos going to jail. You're not the Africans. Some of you blow up every once a blue moon. Someone blows up and it's a big deal. You know, someone hangs a noose, so on and so forth. But that's not really energy. That's just a little bit seeping out. Believe me, that's nothing. And that's what some parties are worried about. They're worried about them shutting down the country. You can do that. You can shut down the planet. You have power. Maybe you've seen Siegfried and Roy. Siegfried and Roy walking up and down the stage with a white tiger. I'm going to talk more about this because it's important for you to understand how this works under natural law. Power is like that. That tiger has latent power. He's just allowing them to walk up and down the stage with him. He doesn't have to allow that. He can make history. He can make the news today if he chooses to exercise power. And there's many different types of ways to exercise power. He can just tug on the leash and drag them off the stage. He can rip his head off. White tigers can do that. Why? It's natural law. Natural law is nothing to fool with. Believe me. And natural law says that eventually will happen. And that's the only thing we know about white tigers. You're probably never really going to tame one because no one ever has. These accidents happen because it's a white tiger. It's nothing to really fool with. You know, two fellows walking on the stage with a white tiger playing with one may be a dicey situation one morning. and that's how ethnic conflict models work in Western civilization. These people in charge have always tried this, but this one, with the hate crime laws, has done something unimaginable. You have a common sense of oppression among a group of non-victims. You have a bunch of white tigers walking around with Siegfried and Roy's, who some of them think they're victims, some of you know you're not. In other words, he has power. He has all the power. When he's going to exercise it, no one really knows. And there's many ways to do that. He could pull a plug. You know, white guys are in all kinds of positions of power. They can do anything they choose to do. Now you're talking about what has damned this. Well, the hate crime laws have damned it. There's another thing called Lone Ranger, and I'm going to go into Lone Ranger. Lone Ranger is my next spiel. Lone Ranger has been isolated. Lone Ranger is starting to be isolated by circumstances. And I'm going to go into that. But what you need to understand about this ethnic conflict model is they've done an impossible. They've tried to square a circle, they've ticked off the circles, and now they've honed a sickle. Honing a sickle is something that goes back to the American Revolution. The American Revolution, a very similar group, a group related to them, tried to do something and they kept pushing. Well, they didn't push, but they honed a sickle. When